Okay, let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Today we're tackling, well, a really dramatic public falling out between two incredibly visible figures, U.S. President Donald Trump and tech billionaire Elon Musk.
Yeah, it escalated fast. The sources we've looked at, articles, reports, various analyses, they paint this picture of a relationship going from, well, surprisingly close
Right.
to openly hostile almost overnight, it seems.
Exactly. So our mission in this deep dive really is to cut through the noise, all the back and forth on social media.
Mm-hmm. Get past the headlines?
Yeah, and understand what the sources actually report happened. Why does this sudden break matter?
And what are the potential consequences, not just for them personally or their companies?
But for government programs, big ones, and maybe even the wider political landscape.
Definitely. There's some surprising details in there.
Okay, so before this whole thing blew up, the sources talk about a time when they were, well, incredibly close. Not just colleagues.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
The terms used were things like bromance, a love-in. Some sources even said they were inseparable. It sounds intense.
Intense is a good word. How did the sources kind of illustrate that closeness? What details did they point to?
Well, what's really fascinating is the level of access Musk seems to have had. He wasn't just, dropping by for meetings occasionally.
Right.
Sources describe him actually serving as a special government employee. They even had a nickname for it, apparently Doge-E.
OGE, okay. And specific moments.
Oh, yeah. They mentioned Musk being in the Oval Office with Trump. Apparently, Lulex was there too.
Oh, wow.
And was, according to one source, quite engrossed in picking his nose at the time.
Huh. Well, that paints a picture, doesn't it, about the unusual proximity.
It really does. And beyond that, attending cabinet meetings together, traveling on Air Force One, even Marine One.
And Musk reportedly stayed overnight at the White House.
That's what the sources say. And you have Trump quoted directly saying he'd helped Elon a lot. It suggests a real supportive relationship from the president's side, at least initially.
And it wasn't all behind the scenes either, was it?
No. Musk was reportedly a significant campaign donor. He even appeared on stage with Trump at one point.
I think I remember seeing that one source described him jumping for joy next to the president.
That's the one. It
Yeah.
really shows how deeply embedded he seemed in Trump's inner circle during that period.
And then there was that very public display, the Tesla showcase.
Oh, yeah. Right there at the White House South Portico. Sources reported Trump showing off a Cybertruck and a Model S.
And didn't Trump claim he'd bought one?
He did. It was, a very clear public signal of presidential favor towards Musk and his companies.
Okay, so that sets the scene, this period of intense closeness, the bromance phase, as the sources put it. So what happened? What did the report say was the trigger for the breakdown? Where did it all start to go wrong?
Well, the public split, according to everything we've read, really kicked off when Musk started attacking a major piece of legislation.
The big spending bill Trump was championing.
Exactly. The one Trump himself called the Big Beautiful Bill.
Right, but Musk had a very different name for it.
He certainly did. The language quoted in the sources is incredibly strong. He called it an abomination.
An abomination, wow.
Yeah, and also a big, ugly spending bill, which, is quite a contrast.
A huge contrast to how Trump was framing it. He called it one of the greatest bills ever presented to Congress, right?
And highlighted a record cut in expenses, $1.6 trillion, claimed it was the biggest tax cut ever given. So completely opposite descriptions.
And part of the core conflict here, based on the sources, seems to be this disagreement over whether Musk knew about it beforehand.
Yes, that's a key point of contention. Trump claimed Musk knew every aspect of this bill better than almost anybody.
Implying Musk's criticism only came after he was sort of out of the loop, maybe for personal reasons.
That seemed to be the suggestion. But Musk pushed back really hard on that.
How did he respond?
On X, pretty directly.
Yep.
He said it was false. This bill was never shown to me even once.
Okay, a flat denial.
A flat denial. And he added that it was passed in the dead of night so fast that almost no one in Congress could even read it. So you've got this direct clash over the facts playing out very publicly.
And the sources did give us some idea of what was in this bill, the one causing all the friction. Without taking sides, what did they report?
Well, reports indicated it included things like extending Trump's earlier tax cuts, money for mass deportations, funding for the border wall,
Okay.
new tax write-offs that apparently only applied while Trump is president, potentially restricting federal courts, making changes to social safety net programs.
And crucially,
Crucially, reports suggested it provided more benefits for the wealthy than the poor, and also ended some of Biden's green energy incentives.
Ah, okay. That last part sounds particularly relevant, given Musk's businesses. Did the sources connect those dots?
They did. The sources think it pretty clear this wasn't just, an abstract policy disagreement for Musk.
It hit his bottom line.
Exactly. Reports indicated he was actively lobbying against parts of the bill that would cut back tax credits for electric vehicles and for residential solar.
Things that directly benefit Tesla.
Directly benefit Tesla's profits, yeah. And he was also apparently against a new annual $250 fee for EV drivers that was mentioned in the bill details.
So when he called it an abomination, it seems pretty tied to the financial impact on his companies.
It certainly looks that way based on the reporting. It
Yeah.
shows how deeply intertwined his business fortunes are with government policy decisions.
Okay, so we have this background of closeness and this sudden, very public fight over the spending bill and conflicting stories about who knew what, when. How did that disagreement just explode into this really intense public feud?
Well, once that disagreement over the bill broke open, it went from maybe private tensions to all-out public war very quickly.
Primarily on their respective platforms, Truth Social and X.
That's right. The reports describe Trump's first reaction as, disappointment, using words like very disappointed, surprised. He suggested the bromance might be over.
But it didn't stop there.
No, it escalated rapidly. Trump then claimed Musk went crazy and even put it out there that he had asked Musk to leave the administration.
Right, changing the narrative a bit there. And then came the threat, the one aimed squarely at Musk's business interests.
Exactly. That was a major turning point. Trump posted on Truth Social very directly, the easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts.
Wow, that's moving way beyond personal insults. That's targeting billions in government deals.
Billions. A huge escalation.
And Musk, well, he didn't exactly stay quiet, did he? He fired back on X.
Oh, he fired back hard and fast. A whole series of responses,
Yeah.
including the pretty audacious claim that without me, Trump would have lost the election.
That's a big claim.
Huge claim. And he called Trump's reaction to the bill criticism such ingratitude.
Yeah.
But he went further.
What else?
He suggested Trump should be impeached and replaced by the vice president, J.D. Vance.
Impeached. Okay. And he also jumped into economic policy predictions.
Yes, took a direct shot at Trump's signature policy, warning that Trump's global tariffs will cause a recession in the second half of this year.
And then there was that really explosive claim about Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, that was extraordinary. An unverified claim, the sources stressed, but Musk put it out there, suggesting Trump appears in some unreleased Epstein files.
Which got a reaction even from the current White House, didn't it?
It did. The press secretary called it an unfortunate episode and explicitly linked it back to Musk being unhappy about the spending bill.
Kind of reinforcing the idea that the bill was the root cause of all this, from their perspective.
Exactly. And Musk kept going, didn't he? Ran that poll on X about starting a new political party.
That's right, for the 80% in the middle. How did that poll do?
Sources reported really strong support, 81.9% saying yes, out of over 2.1 million votes. Quite a response.
And he made that comment comparing their time horizons, suggesting his own staying power.
Yeah, that was interesting, saying Trump has 3.5 years left as president, but that he himself will be around for 40-plus years, sort of implying, long-term influence versus a limited term.
And we can't forget the threat involving SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft, even though he apparently walked it back later.
Right, that was startling. The initial public threat to begin decommissioning Dragon, he did rescind it hours later, saying he won't decommission.
But just making the threat, even briefly.
Even briefly, yeah. It was a
Okay.
significant moment. It showed perhaps a willingness to use his crucial business assets as leverage in this political fight.
And this isn't just online drama, is it? The sources point to immediate, real-world consequences. What happened with Tesla's stock?
The financial markets reacted strongly and immediately, according to the reports. Tesla's stock plunged 14% on Thursday.
14%, that's huge.
Huge. In heavy trading. The sources said it wiped about 152 B-cents off its market value, described as the biggest hit ever to its market cap.
Wow. And it dropped below that trillion-dollar mark.
It did, settled around $916 billion. A symbolic but also significant drop.
And obviously that hits Musk personally, too.
Oh, definitely. Reports noted it knocked about $8.73 off his personal net worth just like that.
And it wasn't just Tesla.
No, the sources mentioned a ripple effect. Other EV makers, particularly in Asia, also saw their share prices fall following the news of this feud.
So beyond the market reaction, let's circle back to Trump's threat about contracts. That's a serious risk for Musk, especially SpaceX, right? How dependent are they?
Oh, heavily dependent. We're talking billions. Sources cite figures like $3.8 billion just for fiscal year 2024.
Just 1 year.
Just 1 year.
Yeah.
The company's COO reportedly estimated about $22 billion in total current contracts. Other reports mention around $15 billion just from NASA.
And the Washington Post had an even bigger number over the years.
Yeah, they cited a total of $38 billion over many years from Washington across different agencies. So these contracts are absolutely vital for SpaceX, for funding, operations, everything.
And that Dragon threat you mentioned, even retracted, it highlights the other side of the coin, doesn't it? The government's reliance on SpaceX.
It really does. Dragon is critical for NASA. It's how they get astronauts and supplies to the International Space Station right now.
And it was developed with NASA money, too.
Significant NASA money, yes. $396 million, specifically cited in the sources. So any threat to its operation, however temporary, it really underscores how essential SpaceX has become.
And NASA's reaction reflected that sensitivity.
Very cautious, yes. Their public statement just talked about continuing to work with partners, trying to stay above the fray, you imagine.
Understandably. And then you had reactions from other political figures jumping in. Steve Bannon's comments were particularly extreme.
They really were quite remarkable. He reportedly called for Trump to actually seize SpaceX tonight, before midnight.
Seize the company.
Seize the company. And even suggested investigating Musk's immigration status, possibly for deportation.
Even though Musk is a U.S. citizen.
Even though he's a U.S. citizen. It just shows how quickly this feud spiraled into these much broader and, frankly, more inflammatory political attacks.
The sources also flagged another big risk area for Musk's empire: regulation.
Yeah, that's a really crucial point. A public fight with a potential or former president could put all of Musk's companies under a much brighter, maybe harsher regulatory spotlight.
And he has companies across many sectors.
So many. The sources list agencies like the FCC, which oversees Starlink, the FBA for Neuralink, the EPA, the NHTSA.
Which already investigates Tesla's autopilot.
Exactly. They have ongoing investigations into the driver assistance software. Then there's the FAA, which regulates SpaceX and has fined them before, and the FTC, too.
So it's not just a theoretical risk. There are multiple agencies with real oversight.
Real oversight, real power to cause delays, impose fines, launch investigations. It creates a lot of potential friction points if the relationship with the government sours.
And all the scrutiny the market hit, it comes at a tricky time for Tesla anyway, doesn't it? According to the reports.
It really does. The sources point to existing headwinds, like sales slowing down in big markets like China and Europe.
And brand reputation issues?
Yeah, a noted decline in brand reputation, particularly in the West. Plus that ongoing pressure to finally deliver on the robotaxi service they've promised for so long.
So this feud just adds another layer of, well, complexity and uncertainty.
Absolutely. On top of an already challenging picture for Tesla.
And looking bigger picture, what do the sources suggest about the potential political fallout if this conflict keeps going?
Well, reports indicated that a continuing public battle could actually make things more difficult for Republicans down the line.
How so?
Maybe by alienating some voters who like Musk, or perhaps more tangibly, if Musk decides to use his considerable wealth to fund opponents. He's been a donor before.
Right. And the Democrats?
They seem to be mostly watching from the sidelines, according to the sources, likely seeing potential upside for them if it causes divisions or problems for the Republicans.
It's useful to hear from people who know these figures. What did Walter Isaacson, Musk's biographer, say?
Isaacson offered some interesting context. He described Musk in these situations as not exactly calibrated and said he seemed seriously upset.
And he pointed to a specific trigger beyond the bill itself.
Yes, something mentioned in reports. Musk was apparently very annoyed about the pulled nomination of Jared Isaacman.
The pilot who invested in SpaceX.
That's the one. Musk reportedly saw that move as a direct personal attack, which might have fueled his reaction to the bill later on.
Interesting. And Kara Swisher, the tech reporter, she had a take on Musk's public image.
Yeah, she reportedly drew a comparison to Bill Gates back during Microsoft's antitrust battles, suggesting that, personal brand issues can sometimes be rehabilitated over time.
But she also acknowledged some current issues.
Yes, she reportedly also described Musk as clearly troubled in some of his recent public actions.
And then, of course, Anthony Scaramucci weighed in.
Yes. Never one to miss commenting on Trump drama. His reaction was described in the sources as, well, gloating.
Sounds about right. It seems like a lot of people are watching this play out with a mix of fascination and maybe some concern.
Or maybe a bit of schadenfreude, depending on where you sit.
And the platforms themselves, X and Truth Social, were central to this whole thing.
Absolutely. They are the modern arenas for these kinds of fights.
Yeah.
And there was that interesting point from Noah Smith mentioned in the sources.
About Trump and X.
Yeah, about why Trump maybe didn't fully re-embrace X after being allowed back on. Smith's idea was it was about maintaining control.
Control, how so?
The thinking being maybe Trump feared that if he became too dependent on X again, Musk could potentially wield power over him by, say, restricting his account.
Interesting strategic thought there. Shows how the platform itself is part of the power dynamic.
Definitely. And just to loop back to the start, that White House press secretary's statement calling Musk's Epstein claim unfortunate, but tying it directly to his anger over the bill.
Right.
It really reinforces the administration's narrative that this whole firestorm ignited from that one piece of legislation.
Okay. So we've really dug into the sources covering this, well, this extraordinary and very public split between Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
Yeah, quite a journey. From that period of really surprising closeness,
The bromance.
right through it to the incredibly fast escalation over that spending bill, trading really serious threats, personal and business, across their social platforms.
And you've seen how the sources show this is much more than just, a Twitter spat between powerful guys.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
There are tangible impacts highlighted in the reports on stock markets, on Musk's wealth.
And on critical government programs like space travel that literally depend on SpaceX.
Yeah.
Plus the potential ripples through the political landscape.
It's this really complex mix, isn't it? Huge business interests, massive political ambition, and these very public, very volatile personalities clashing.
It really is. And all of this, it raises a pretty important question for us to think about as we wrap up. Given these huge financial stakes, these critical government dependencies we talked about, the significant regulatory oversight Musk's companies are under, what happens next if this conflict just keeps simmering or flares up again?
Yeah, what are the long-term consequences?
Exactly. And how might these events, this kind of public battle, potentially reshape the often tricky relationship between major business leaders and political power moving forward?
That's definitely something to mull over.